Okay, Chris, you've inspired me to go through this in detail. Um, I don't know. I find this stuff pretty interesting, so I figured I'd go through and show how all this kind of works and connects. So, the two main things on this board that I think, solve a lot of problems are one, getting a decent junction in-out box so all your cables connect in the same place. Because using this switcher, oh, those are my feet. Using this switcher, it's a Moen switcher, which basically creates independent loops for every pedal. So down here you have an in and an out that goes to one pedal, an in and out that goes to another, an in and out, a set for each one. And what you can do is create presets with this so you can switch between selections of those pedals, and you can see these lights are changing. Each one of these represents one of those loops. The green ones are in the effects loop of the amp, and the red ones are in front of the amp before that hits the preamp. So everything that you would normally connect on your floor before you connect it to the input of your amplifier. So what it does is it allows you to have 5 presets selecting, different combinations of those pedals, and then you can select different banks. You have A, B, C, D, I think up to I, represented over here, which bank you're in that you can select. And then you have your tuner completely removed from your circuit. So when I click on tuner, the tuner gets put into the loop. Everything else gets disconnected and muted to the amp until I reselect it. One of the things that is kind of irritating about this pedal in particular is if you hit the preset twice by accident, you go into bypass mode, and it completely takes the entire switcher out of the equation, which means every single one of your pedals comes out of the equation, and you're just getting a clean signal of your guitar as if it wasn't going through anything on your board straight to your amp, which is good if you're trying to troubleshoot when you're connecting this thing, because as you can see, there is a shit ton of cables that could possibly cause problems if something is wired incorrectly, if something's being pulled out just a little bit and breaks the signal chain. Me and DJ both use similar switchers. He uses a different one that's a smaller footprint. The only difference is he doesn't get these easy access buttons. He has to go into a program mode to do it. But the other cool thing that it does is, as you can see, I have one of these labeled C. The ones in the green ones in the effects loop have dual function where you can set them to control either an effects loop on your amp or channel switching on your amp. So basically what I have here is anything that you see that C lit up is a high gain channel on my amp. So as I go down, these are all high gain presets that I have. Most of them are, and then I have a clean one over here, and as you can see, the C gets turned off, and that would set my Archon into its clean channel, and I have different effects set up to go with that. So basically how this goes is I've painstakingly labeled all this stuff because I'm neurotic, is my guitar goes in, and then from here it goes into the Moen. The Moen has a cool feature where it has a buffered in or non-buffered in, so if you have a fuzz pedal or a distortion that doesn't like buffers early on in the signal chain, you can bypass that so you don't get issues. I don't. Actually, the first thing in my chain is this VFE Focus, which is basically a low cut and a high cut, and you can select slopes on it and boost and how much you mix it into your original signal. It's probably one of the coolest pedals if you don't want to get into flavored stuff like tube screamers and whatnot, and you just really want to tighten up the low end or tame the high end. This pedal is pretty unbeatable for that. I use it as a lo-fi effect where I'm totally cutting off all the low end to give that sort of transistor radio sort of sound for that one moment that I need it. But, I have no idea what buffer is in this thing. I don't know if it's good, bad, or ugly. I had a pretty good buffer that runs at 18 volts. So I just decided to use that instead of using the one that's built in here. So this is the first thing that gets hit, and then this goes into the Moen. And everything in front of my amp is buffered across the board after that. So going through what each of these are, Kingsley, just heard about this pedal company. They basically make preamps in a pedal form factor. A lot of their pedals actually are designed to not go into the front of a tube amp or solid state amp. I guess it doesn't really matter. They're actually designed as full functioning preamps to be plugged into the effects loop. They actually run 12AX7s inside. I don't know if some of their other pedals run different tubes, but as you can see, it's a pretty big pedal. They just redesigned them to be smaller, but there are tubes inside. This runs at 12 volts, and then it's bumped up internally to 250 volts. This isn't one of those junky pedals that just throws a tube in it to claim that it has tube tone. This is a full-featured tube pre, and what's cool about it is you get two OD settings, basically channels. This one is not designed to go into your effects loop. This is actually a booster, the Jouster. It sounds like a Marshall. It sounds amazing. I use it with my Archon because my clean channel is so pristine. I can't actually get it to get any grit. So I use this to sort of dirty up that clean channel, and I use the OD1. The OD2 is a little more aggressive, and I basically use that for a couple moments where I need to insert some sort of more bombastic distortion, but I don't want to go to my full-on gain channel on the Archon. This, which is one of the coolest pedals, and I cover it up just because the paint job is rather confusing to find the LED. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm crazy about this stuff. I tape this switch over because I've kicked it quite a few times. I use it in latching mode, and what this is the Electro-Harmonix Super Ego. What's cool about this is it's sort of the big brother of the Freeze pedal. And what it does differently than the Freeze is it does this cool thing with layering. And I use it in the beginning of a new song we do, Cro-Magnon, where I have this drone tone. And basically what I do to create that drone tone, and I'll just go back for a second, is I have a volume pedal. It's not at the beginning of my chain. A lot of people put it at the beginning of their chain. It's actually at the end of the chain before it hits the input of the Archon. So what that means is I can mute my signal going to my amp, but still do something with these pedals and still have them getting signal. It's just not going into the amp. So what I do is I go here and turn off my volume so there's no sound going out of my speakers, and then I start layering notes on top of each other. And every time I strum and I hit this, it puts a layer on top, and it puts a layer on top. And you can set how far back every previous layer gets pushed when a new layer lays on top of it. So you get this sort of bagpipey drone sort of thing happening, and you can make some really cool pads underneath what you're doing, and then you just double tap to kill it. So what happens is, I make a layer, 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 while DJ is making faces at me that it takes so long to do this. And then I go over here and I slowly let it go to my amp, and it sounds like this really cool building sort of tone that comes out of nowhere. So that's that, right? Then we've got the John Pertucci, I can never say that guy's name, TC Electronics. I believe they call this his chorus pedal. It's the Dreamscape, but it has chorus flanger vibe in it. It has a bunch of stuff, and it has the tone print feature that's in all of their pedals, which allows you to upload your favorite presets to this. They have artist stuff on their website. What I like about it is it has, if you can see, it has trouble focusing on what's there, but what it says is bright, dark, and normal, which is really great. Actually, I didn't want to believe that this pedal was going to be good, but it's actually amazing. There's really no sort of modulated sound you can't get out of it. You can plug in an app to it, and you can tweak the internal sort of workings of everything to your heart's content. It kind of works like a modeler. You can really get in depth into what you're doing with this, and it's really cool. I wouldn't really buy anything else if I was going to get a modulating pedal. So then that moves into the Afterneath, which is one of the cooler things I've gotten in recent purchases. The Afterneath is sort of a blend between a short delay and a reverb. I can't decide which one it's more of, but you get this sort of, I don't know, just look up the demos. I won't even like really explain it, but it's its own thing, and I've never heard anything like it, and I use it very sparingly because it's kind of hard to use it in any way but the one thing it sort of does. But I would look that up if you're looking for something and tired of traditional verb or delay sort of effects. Then the last thing that goes out of my board before it hits the amp is a booster. I've had quite a few boosts to try to tighten up the low end without killing it. I really like the Spark. The Spark has quite a lot of bite, and it has a little switch up there that it won't focus on, but it's there. For a flat EQ, which they call clean, a fat EQ, which boosts sort of the low mids, and then a mid boost, which is sort of in tube screamer territory, which everybody loves to have hitting the front of their amp because it sort of gives you that cut that you kind of need. It also has active EQ, which is great to tame the bass and the treble. Most of the time on a tube screamer, you get one tone control, and you either dial it bright or dark. Here, you basically leave the mids where they are, and you're taming either the high end or the low end. Actually, what we found really usable was the gain control, which adds a little bit of compression, but not crazy, and a little bit of hair that kind of makes my Archon a little bit more grainy, which was good because the Archon is a little bit polite in its distortion, which is good for definition, but it, sometimes it just doesn't sound mean enough, and this is great. So I have this punched in only when I'm doing dirty stuff. Clean stuff, it's out, and then this goes basically into the input of my Archon. So basically everything leaves here and goes into the input of my amp. Right now it's jumpered because I'm using a combo amp at home and it doesn't have an effects loop, so I'm basically sending it back into what the effects loop would be on my Archon if it were here. And what happens is now the effects loop enters here and it goes through this series of pedals across the top. And so what I have up here is basically all my time delays. Time delays